Alright mates, how's it going? In today's video, chapter 16 of Arthas Rise of the Lich King. 'Tis the end of part 2 of the book, as well as the end of quite a few other things as well. So let's get... As Arthas returned to the camp, he was pleased to see that the battle hadn't ended yet. However, the small army of humans and dwarves had dwindled a fair bit, with those that had fallen now fighting for the other side, because they were undead now. The prince then spotted Falric, whose armour was absolutely covered in blood and stuff. Prince Arthas, we've done what we could, but... Hang on, where's Moradin? Moradin is dead, but his death was not in vain. Take heart, Captain. The enemy will not stand long against the might of Frostmourne. And then, without warning, and much to the disbelief of his men, Arthas went ahead and charged right into the fray. Back when he'd fought with his blessed hammer, Arthas had been a force to be reckoned with. But that was nothing compared to the damage he was now dealing with Frostmourne. He was one-shotting undead fools left and right. The room blade itself was perfectly balanced, as all things should be, and the bodies of ghouls and skeletons and zombies were piling up all around him. At one point, during his little rampage, Arthas caught a glimpse of Falric and some of the other men just kind of staring at him, with a look that was a little bit awe, but also a little bit shock and horror. What was their problem? Whatever. There was more pressing matters at hand. Mal'Ganis, show yourself. You taunted me into coming here, now stand and face me. And then boof, the Demon Lord was indeed there standing and facing him. And he was bigger than Arthas remembered, but the prince wasn't rattled by his frightening appearance this time. So, you've taken up Frostmourne at the expense of your comrades' lives, just as the Dark Lord said you would. You're stronger than I thought. You're wasting your breath, Mal'Ganis. I heed only the voice of Frostmourne now. You hear the voice of the Dark Lord. He whispers to you through the blade you wield. You what, mate? Arthas felt the blood drain from his face. His Dreadlord's master was speaking to him. Did that mean that he'd willingly walked right into a really elaborate trap, like an idiot? What does he say to you, human? What does the Dark Lord of the Dead tell you now? Mal'Ganis looked really smug about this twist. As far as he was concerned, everything was going exactly the way it should be. So he was a little bit confused when the small, weak human prince stood before him started smirking and looking a bit smug himself. He tells me that the time for my vengeance has come. I'm sorry, what? And then Arthas charged, and as he struck at the Dreadlord again and again, two words floated about in his mind.
Frostmourne hungers.
Hungers for what? Whatever. Arthas hungered too, for revenge. And soon enough, he got it. The Dreadlord faltered for just a second, and was unable to deflect a deadly slash across his midsection. Dark blood spurted out, and down he went. It is finished.
This part of your journey, yes, young prince. But there is so much more. So much power that could be yours. So much knowledge and control.
Arthas wiped Frostmourne clean, gazed at the demon lay stiffening at his feet, and then looked all around him. Frostmourne, or this mysterious Dark Lord, was right. There was more to come. There's the rest of this chapter and then 8 more chapters afterwards. Sometime later, bells rang out in the kingdom of Lordaeron. These were usually only rang on real important occasions, like a royal wedding or the funeral of a king. But today, they were to mark the fact that Prince Arthas Menethil was returning home. He'd sent word of his triumph to the king. A courier had arrived a few days earlier with a letter that said, I would speak privately with you, father, and tell you of the things I have learned and seen. You have, I am certain, spoken with Jaina and Uther. I can imagine they've said some things. Bunch of knobs. I assure you, I have only done what I believe to be the greatest good for the citizens of Lordaeron. And in the end, I have destroyed the one who began this plague. And now I am coming home, to begin a new era for our kingdom. As Arthas walked the road leading towards Capital City, he was greeted by cheers and applause. The entire nation had shown up to thank him for saving them from disaster. And so they should, but Arthas remained silent as he marched. The men behind him were silent as well, and they were all hooded, for reasons that will soon become clear. And as they entered the city, the cheers continued, with rose petals raining down from above. The combination of the bells ringing out, and the rose petals and the cheering crowds made Arthas think about Jaina for a moment. This was pretty much what their wedding day would have looked like. And the thought moved him so much that he held a hand out and caught one of the falling petals. But his brief smile quickly turned to a frown as the petal decomposed almost immediately in his hand. So he tossed the dead thing away and continued. He then pushed open the huge doors to the throne room, strode forward and kneeled before his father. My son, I'm glad to see you safely home. As the king stood up from his throne, Arthas noted how unsteady and ill he looked. Obviously the incidents of the last several months had aged him a little bit. He looked tired, but it was all going to be alright now. He no longer needed to sacrifice for his people, no longer needed to bear the weight of his crown. Arthas had taken care of everything. Arthas then stood up and drew back his hood and moved towards his father. The king's eyes widened as he processed his only son's change in appearance. The prince's hair wasn't blonde anymore, it was bone white, and his face was all pale and shit. The prince then drew back his blade, the runes on it glowing in anticipation, but a voice popped in his head. Not of Frostmourne's, but a memory of something Varian Rin had said a lifetime ago. He was assassinated. A trusted friend managed to get him to speak to her alone, and then she killed him. Stabbed him right in the heart. However, Arthas just kind of shook his head, and the voice was silenced. "What are you doing, my son?" "Succeeding you, father." And with that, Frostmourne's hunger was sated. At least for the moment, anyway. Arthas then turned his new unquestioning subjects loose. Death Knights. That was the fate of the men who had joined him in Northrend and then returned home with him. The people of the city, who had only been cheering and celebrating like 5 minutes ago, now lay dead, with their limbs ripped off and their bodies broken. Arthas didn't give a crap if they ended up as carrion for the crows or new subjects to follow his rule. He'd leave that up to his captains, Falric and Marwyn, to decide, because he had somewhere else to be. Ever since he'd started smelling like a corpse, Arthas couldn't seem to get near a horse anymore. They'd just bolt at the sight of him. So, he basically had to walk and run everywhere. And although the power granted to him from Frostmourne prevented him from getting tired, it was still kind of a bore ache. But soon, it would no longer be an issue. Arthas reached his destination, the Balnir Farmstead. His Death Knights had already been through here, so there was a slight feeling of pain as he saw the corpses of Joram and Jaram, beaten and bloodied. But he pushed those feelings down and strode towards a grave that was nearly 7 years old. With Frostmourne gripped in one hand, Arthas extended his other one. Some kind of dark light began to glow from it, before leaping from his fingers into the earth below. And the prince was absolutely over the moon when he felt the energy connect with the skeleton buried there. Arise! The grave erupted and Arthas grew increasingly excited. "I saw you being born. I helped you come into this world. And I helped you leave it. And now, by my hand, you are reborn." As far as Arthas was concerned, this had all been part of his destiny. If he had not slain his steed 7 years ago, then he would not now be able to bring it back. Alive, it would have been absolutely terrified of Arthas. But undead, he and Invincible were reunited, together forever, as it was always meant to be. So once again, the prince felt vindicated. He hadn't been wrong. He's never been wrong. Every decision he's ever made has been fantastic. And we're leaving it there. So that's the end of part 2, The Bright Lady. Part 3 is the rest of the book, and it's called The Dark Lady. So it's time for some Sylvanas stuff. We'll skip the interlude though, and just jump right into chapter 17 in the next video. As usual, link in the description if you're interested in buying this book. Also, there's links to my Discord server and my Patreon page too. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, all of that bollocks. And all that's left to say is, thanks for watching, and see ya!